You are here for Workforce Wednesday, making sense of career pathways. Our presenter today is Andrea Skipper. My name again is Olga Escamilla, and I have Anne Marie Molinari Sanders. She is here as my co-host. So again, welcome to Workforce Wednesday, making sense of career pathways. And at this time, I would like to introduce our presenter, Andrea Skipper. So Andrea is a post-exit workforce integration coordinator at Community Action Incorporated of Central Texas. She has experience teaching both ESL and ABE classes. She previously worked as an employee experience manager in the fashion retail sector, and she has an MBA in management and human resources from Louisiana State University, Shreveport. So welcome, Andrea, and take it away.
All right. Hi, everyone. Like Olga said, my name is Andrea Skipper. I work over at Community Action. And today we're going to be going over our Workforce Wednesday presentation, Making Sense of Career Pathways. So our objectives today, we're going to be going over, can we teach it? And this is referring to financial literacy. Who can teach it? Some different elements relating to financial literacy, how to start simple with some budgeting lessons with your students, some ways we can work on career exploration to help increase those income levels for our students, setting career goals, and lastly, how to set students up for success. So I wanted to start off with a poll, and should we talk about income and spending habits with our students? Looks like all but 2 people said yes, and the only other 2 that didn't say yes just said maybe. All righty. Okay, so I'm glad to see that we didn't have a bunch of people saying no, but talking about money can be very uncomfortable in the classroom, especially because it feels very personal. It's a very personal topic. So we tend to avoid it in the classroom. But unfortunately, because people aren't talking about these things very often, because it's uncomfortable, this leads to a lot of issues with financial illiteracy. People don't understand money and what to do with it. And many of the students that I work with have actually reported that they have either never or rarely had conversations with teachers, counselors, or adults in their personal lives about how to handle finances. Oftentimes, I'm the first person in their life that's ever explained how a credit score works, or even sometimes how to do simple things like use a coupon. They don't understand what the coupons mean and how to use them. There are occasionally some students that are really uninterested in these topics, but most of the time, the students that I work with are actually extremely grateful that someone took the time to teach them something that's so applicable to their everyday life. And of course, as we're working with our adult students, it is so very important that we consider the question, how is this applicable to the student? Every time, before we have a conversation, before we have a lesson, before we decide to have a class, we need to be thinking about how it's applicable to the student. And one of the things that's most applicable, of course, is their income, because that's how they're covering their expenses in their lives. So I was curious to see exactly how much our students earn after they're leaving our programs. And one way that we can see this is on the monthly NPR summary report that Mahalia, who is our AEL state director with Texas Workforce Commission, sends out. And if you're a teacher or coordinator, you might not have access to this, but this is something that every program director would have access to and could tell you about. So at the state level, our students' median income in the second quarter after exiting our programs is $5,105. And that number comes from July 2019 to June 2020. So this means that the adult education students that have stopped attending classes are earning that much money in the 90 to 180 days after they leave us. And these medium income levels vary across service areas within the state. Our area with the lowest median income was at $3,360, and the highest was over at the Midland College area with $7,257. So, a wide variety there. And this doesn't mean that the students, teachers, or career counselors aren't working as hard as ones in other areas. A lot of this can be attributed to the different availability of jobs in different areas of the state and how much employers are willing to pay for different jobs in different areas. So we don't typically think of our money in quarterly income, like how much do I earn every 3 months? We usually look at this as an hourly or salary income. So if we break this down and look at it as working 40 hours a week, that means the median hourly income for our students across the state is $9.81 an hour. But I know that not all of our students are working 40-hour work weeks, but it's good to think about how much they're realistically earning. Some of those students may be young, childless people that are still dependent on their parents or some other family member, while others are single parents with multiple children to financially support. So it's important when you're talking with students about financial literacy to remember that every student's income needs are going to be different because they all have different expenses. So the question here is, can we teach it? Can we teach financial literacy in our HSC, GED, and IET classrooms? And the answer is yes. So I know sometimes our teachers might be, wary to discuss topics like financial literacy because they don't seem particularly relevant to the core focus of the class. If you've got a GED student that says, I've passed 3 of my subjects, I have 1 left, and then you throw in some financial literacy things in class, it can seem a little strange to them, but most of the time it's really easy to integrate financial literacies into our lesson plans, and they are all covered by our content standards. So every time we're teaching a class, they have to be covering some of our content standards that the state gives out. So the first of these standards is the vocabulary development. And I personally think this is the most applicable standard. We know that financial literacy uses a specialized set of vocabulary that students typically won't gain by doing their average, daily readings in their classes. But by equipping students with the understanding of this set of vocabulary, they'll be able to understand financial documents such as loan agreements with a higher level of accuracy. Instead of just saying, yes, this looks great, and signing their name, they'll be able to read that document and understand what it means exactly. Next one would be the comprehension of text. So students can start to link financial literacy concepts together by doing a variety of readings and working to comprehend the concepts as a whole. And being able to understand written information can help them become more independent in their learning process and able to learn new things independently after they've left our classrooms. However, in order to find this information, students will typically need to be able to use a computer or other electronic device. So when we're combining those skills of vocabulary, reading comprehension, and these digital skills, students really have the formula for success to learn new ideas relating to life skills. If they can find the information, read the information, and understand the information, they'll be ready to make informed decisions that will impact their future. And some of the digital skills that teaching financial literacy will include are parts of the computer, such as the mouse, monitor, or keyboard. You might be surprised to see how many of your students don't have those basic skills. Using keywords to find information on the internet, selecting reliable sources, and even possibly programs like Microsoft Excel or Google Sheets, especially if you're doing things like budgeting or comparing different loans, comparing different careers and their income levels. You can do those things in those different types of software. And I also think that gathering sources is a skill that's sometimes overlooked because we make the assumption that it's something that everyone knows how to do. I've had many students who at first appeared to be very tech savvy. They were able to send me emails and, send text messages and get on Twitter and all kinds of things like that. But then they come up to me and ask things like, how do I look for a job? No one had ever taken the time to show them how to do things like that. Or is a savings account different from a checking account? These are all real questions that my students have asked me, and they're usually from people that appeared to know how to use technology, but they didn't have those skills to be able to look for different sources. So integrating the skills of information searching is really essential for our student success, especially when we consider that they might not stay in touch with us their entire lives. A lot of them are going to leave us, so we need to set them up for success to be independent and find information on their own. So our next one would be our variety of basic math concepts. So from addition to subtraction to calculating compound interest, financial literacy does require a certain level of math mastery. And one of the easiest ways to integrate financial literacy concepts into the HSE classroom is by providing questions that utilize math skills while you're studying, and just include ones that have financial issues within them. And another one is for ESL. We can do this with our ESL students too. One time I was finishing up a shopping unit in my intermediate ESL class, and I had set up a mini boutique in the classroom and had the students do role playing as customers, salespeople, and cashiers. I realized when the customers, the students playing customers went up to the students playing cashiers, the cashiers couldn't even do basic math like total up the items, even though I had set the prices for the items at simple numbers like $5 or $10. So I used this moment as, an impromptu lesson on basic addition, how to calculate the total after sales tax. No one in the class knew what the sales tax rate in the area was. And we even got out phones and learned how to use the calculator app. So then they were prepared to go into a real store. So like I mentioned in the beginning, keeping the question, how is this applicable to the student, should be at the forefront of planning every lesson. When students are able to obtain financial literacy skills such as budgeting, they need to be able to understand where they can move forward from that point. So knowing what bills they need to pay is great, but that information alone doesn't impact their life directly. They can know what bills they have, but what do they do next? They know that they need to have a certain income level because of their expenses, but they just don't know where to go next. So working on drawing conclusions with them can help them make decisions that will impact their future positively. And one of our standards is also teaching students how to make connections among income, expenses, and careers. The idea that certain jobs earn more money than others seems really basic to a lot of us, but students often don't know where to find, information about incomes for different jobs. They know basic things like, well, if I'm a doctor or a lawyer, I'm going to make lots of money, but they don't exactly know all the time what other jobs have higher income levels than what they're earning now. So being able to find information about, different income levels, like later we're going to be looking at ONET for a little while, different skills like that, and showing them where they can find that information, what their income level will be, and different paths they can go on is really important, because a lot of them don't quite know how to figure that out on their own. And lastly, one of our standards is covering an economic way of thinking. And that sounds really formal, but it really just means being able to weigh your options when it comes especially to things like finances and career choices. So some examples would be considering how taking on additional debt would impact their future, ways to fund college or other trainings, and understanding their role in financial markets. So there are a couple of specific ESL skills that they would be learning in the classroom doing these activities, like persuading and discussion, collaborating and solving problems, and gaining background knowledge, concepts, and skills by reading in some diverse texts. And in case you haven't found out yet, they have released Content Standards 3.0 that's covering our family and civics literacy. And talking about these things in the classroom helps them make and pursue plans for self-improvement, balance priorities, create a vision for their family, and helping themselves and others. So now we know that we can teach financial literacy concepts in the classroom, but who exactly should be doing the teaching here? So we've already covered a few examples of ways that HSE and ESL teachers can integrate financial literacy into the classrooms. It doesn't necessarily need to be an entire lesson covering finance-specific topics. It's actually a lot better if these concepts are woven into the lesson so that they feel more natural in the learning process, and it makes it feel much more applicable to the students in the classroom. But our adult basic education support teachers for all of our IETs, those integrated education and training courses, they can actually devote a whole day of ABE class specifically to financial literacy. So an example here is I wear, a few different hats within my organization. I know a lot of us do the same. And I do both career pathways navigation, so getting the students into the IET classes. And then for some of our classes, I actually am the ABE teacher. And so I'm doing the activities supporting those students while they're in their training courses. And every time I'm teaching an IET class, we have a day specifically devoted to budgeting and credit. And if it's a very long training course, I'll add more than one ABD day to go over financial literacy so we can really, jump into some really specific topics and learn about that. Because like I said, outside of our classroom, they're probably not getting a lot of education about these things. And if people in their younger years didn't give them a lot of great advice on how to do this, it's something that they need, and we can be there to provide that to them. Can also have entire courses dedicated to financial literacy, which we'll talk more about in just a second. And also our career pathway navigators. I saw in the chat quite a few of the people here today are career pathways navigators, and you can be having these conversations with students too, just more in a one-on-one fashion. So I mentioned we can do financial literacy courses, and this is okay if it's completely financial literacy. So not prepping for GED, not focused on learning English, not focusing on a career pathway. We can teach an entire class on financial literacy as long as we meet these standards here. So as long as they're completing registration, they're taking an eligibility test. So if they're ESL people, they could be doing the BEST series or CASAs, or if they're native English speakers, they can do the TABE or the math CASAs. The students would need to get at least 12 hours of direct contact because that's when we can consider them an actual participant in our program. The course has to be aligned to the content standards, and we just went over exactly which content standards would be relevant. And then, of course, at the end of the class, they would need to do a post test. So I really advocate for doing financial literacy courses that are standalone classes because it helps our programs in a variety of ways. Number one, it helps the students as a whole. We all know that education is only useful to our students if it helps them in some way. And teaching financial literacy gives them really specific skills that will help them both now and in the future. It can also aid in stakeholder integration. So we can reach out to area partners like housing authorities, food banks, and other nonprofits to teach financial literacy. We can say, hey, I see you've got an open space in your housing authority building. Do you think we could do a financial literacy class here? And we can get some of the people that live here to come in and take a class with us. And that's a good way to get more spaces for our classes by reaching out to those places and helping the community. And in turn, they also might help funnel students into our other classes like HSC, ESL, or IETs. Like maybe someone in financial literacy says, oh, I didn't know you guys had free trainings. And then we can get them linked up with another class to follow up and get them where they need to be. Another thing you could do is it might be a little challenging to do recruiting for a financial literacy course that's, a standalone class. So something that I've done in the past is reached out to some community businesses, especially things like banks and other places like that, and asked them for donations that we can give out as incentives for students who do get at least to that 12-hour mark. And it makes it feel like it's more worthwhile for them. And the last person in our group that can really focus on, financial literacy conversations is our career pathways navigator. And this is usually going to be on a more personal level. The model that I utilize with my IET students that I'm doing their career pathways navigating is first I have an orientation as a group where we talk about what the class is going to be like, and we take our, usually TABE or Best Plus is what my program uses. And then during the orientation, I have each student sign up for a one-on-one appointment with me where we're discussing concerns that they have about the class. We go over their ITEC plan with their goal setting. And then I ask them about any resources that they might need to complete the course. And our students might be scared to ask for help. They already feel like I'm taking so much from you already because you're giving me this free class, but they don't know that there are other things that either we can offer or we can help link them up with so they can get things taken care of. So before every orientation, I make sure I have an updated list of resources in the area that would solve some of the most common issues that students have with completing the IET classes. So the ones that I always ask students about is transportation. Do they have money for gas? TWC has just, announced that we're allowed to use specific funding for transportation. So that's something you can talk with your director if you haven't already. Set up some type of transportation aid. Childcare, we can link them up with Workforce Solutions sometimes. Make sure they have the digital skills they need. And every class that we do, I'm talking here specifically about IETs, every class we do requires different digital skills. So they might have an ebook that they have to use. The class might use Zoom occasionally. So do they have the skills to do this? Can you sit down and show them during this one-on-one appointment to make sure they're set up for success? And lastly, and this is probably the most important one, do they have an income source for their basic needs during the class? A lot of times my students say, well, I want to do this training class because I can't pay my bills. I can't pay my bills because I can't find a job. So then halfway through the class, they say, oh, I finally found a job. So I'm going to quit this IET because I have to work because I have to pay my bills. And I was seeing this over and over and over with different classes. So what I did was I worked with some area employers. So anytime a student came in to see me and I said, so how are you going to pay your bills while you do this IET class? And if they said, I don't know, I guess I'll look for a job, I already had a list ready because I talked to some employers in the area that had a really fast turnaround to get people hired and getting paychecks and that had flexible scheduling. And granted, these were usually part-time, but that's a lot better than the nothing that the students had before. So I would help the students get in with these employers, and then I would, especially when I'm looking for those employers, choosing ones that were relevant to the training. So one that I did recently was I had an emergency medical technician EMT class start. So I found a nearby ambulance company that hired EMT students to be a transport specialist. And this position, they didn't need any certifications other than a high school diploma, and they would drive elderly people to doctor's appointments. And then as soon as the students are going to be graduating, the company wants to move them into EMT positions. So they have a job for now and they have a job for later. And I've also done similar things with our CNAs by getting them jobs in nursing homes as things like housekeepers and hospitality aides. And I focus on that income section so much to figure out what they're receiving right now, because the students, a lot of times, they're not seeing the big picture. They're focused on the issues they're dealing with right now and the challenges they're facing right now in this moment. And then they forget the big picture. They forget why they're there. They forget why they wanted to do this IET class with us. And they struggle to make really good decisions that will help them in the long term. So having discussions with students, regardless of your position, regardless of what type of class you're teaching or helping get students into, having the conversation about this is very important to your life because it's going to help you in the future. It's just so necessary to have those conversations so they don't miss the big picture. All righty. So at this time, do we have any questions in the chat? You can type those in there right now.
We did have a couple of comments. Stella said she also teaches financial literacy with her beginning advanced ESL classes. With each class level, she chunks the information. And Andrea says, great idea.
Yeah, that is a great idea.
Oh, here we go. Is there a curriculum that's offered for us to follow? Ooh, good question. Is that coming up?
That is coming up. We're going to go over some different resources that you can use with curriculum that has already been made with teacher lesson plans and PowerPoints and everything.
Thanks for asking, Felicia. Stay tuned.
All righty. So now everyone can respond here in our chat box. What activities do you do now relating to financial literacy?
Kirsten says, teach students how to calculate interest rates, and Evangeline says career options. Thank you. And Stella says, one that comes to mind is identifying needs versus wants. Ooh, that's a good one.
That is an excellent activity.
And Stuart says classes in public housing, referrals to Money Smart, CBI. Okay.
All righty. So next, I'd like for us to focus in on what exactly is financial literacy. Some people think that it's, really simple, just like I open a bank account and then I budget, and they think that's where it stops. But there's really a really wide variety of things that this conversation on financial literacy can involve. So let's take a look at those. So first up are banking basics. Not all of your students have bank accounts. Some of your students are probably operating on a cash-only system and are kind of scared of banks and don't really understand what they're for. Why do they need one? They have no idea, like I said earlier, the differences between, savings accounts and checking accounts and things like that. So having those basic conversations can be really important. So that's kind of the foundation of understanding some financial literacy, is talking about using the banks. Then, of course, this one's the doozy. This is where, students might feel a little ashamed to talk about things with you because, I heard you guys mention in the chat, wants versus needs. This is where that conversation comes in. So a couple different things you can do with your students. The first one is going over this 50-30-20 budgeting rule. And, to be frank with you, this won't be realistic for all of our students. It just won't, because of their income level. But ideally, this is something that they can shoot for in the long run. So this is set up so that 50% of their income goes towards their needs: groceries, housing, utilities, health insurance, car payments, things like that. 20% goes to savings, and then 30% goes to different wants or discretionary income that they can spend on different things like shopping and going out to restaurants and things like that. The secondary rule that a lot of teachers teach is doing the 3 months of expenses rule. So the idea there is that you have enough money in your savings account, so in case you get fired today, you are able to have money to pay for your expenses for at least 3 months. And when I talk about either of these concepts to my students, they are very freaked out. They say, I don't see how that's possible. And so having a conversation on starting small, commit to, if you're really low income, $5. Can you do $5 a month and start somewhere? To have something in that savings account is a lot better than nothing.
What is the best way to introduce financial literacy to students?
Great. So, if they're really low level, I would say starting out with things like bank accounts. And then the next step up would be talking about budgeting, because then you can have the conversation on needs and wants and, kind of building up from there.
Thank you. And then Stella mentions, when you're talking about savings, in her class, she tells her students to pay themselves. So even if it's a small amount, kind of like you mentioned, the $5, she explains what it means to pay yourself. Thank you, Stella.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Then it doesn't feel like punishment to put money in the savings account. It feels like I'm doing this for my future. It gives kind of that idea to it. Yeah, great. Okay. So the next element of financial literacy would be credit scores. And I found that a lot of our students don't really have a firm grasp on what credit reports and scores are, or how they impact their lives in the US. Every time I teach a lesson on credit to my students, even the students who are a bit standoffish and say that they know everything about credit and they don't need to be in this class, I'm sure we've all dealt with some type of student like that in the past. They always come back to me at the end of the lesson and they always say, wow, I really didn't know everything. I learned something. I've never had a student go through a lesson I taught on credit, and at the end they said, this was a waste of my time. So everyone in the classes is learning something from you, even if they don't act like it. And then, There are very few countries in the world that have credit score systems that operate very similarly to the United States. And some countries don't even have credit scores at all. And this puts our immigrant population at a disadvantage in the US because they have no credit when they arrive. So they're considered to be what's called credit invisible. So that can be really challenging for them when they first come because they'll have a hard time getting things like credit cards, housing loans, and also auto loans. And the same concept can be true for our younger students, especially that like kind of 16 to 24 age range, because they haven't had any time to build their credit yet. So in addition to explaining to students what being credit invisible is, you'll probably have some students that have been irresponsible in the past with their credit, and lessons on credit repair can be really beneficial to those students as well. So even if you have a classroom with a combination of age ranges and nationalities, where they're coming from, teaching both sides of that. So teaching them, how do I gain credit and how do I fix my credit? Both of those things are really important to the entire class. It can also, in a way, not scare, but inform the credit invisible ones of what can happen if you are irresponsible with borrowing money. And then looking at housing decisions like renting, owning, or leasing could be an excellent problem-solving lesson for students really in any class, because a lot of times, and from what I've experienced, a lot of students have had parents that only rented their entire lives. So they weren't aware of, how much it would cost to get a house. They have no idea what the process is. They don't know how to apply for loans. They just don't know this information. There's so much that they don't know about it. So having those conversations can be really helpful to them. And the last element we're going to look at today is protecting your identity. So talking about protecting your identity is an essential part of financial literacy, and it can be tied to, teaching credit when you talk to them about checking their credit report for suspicious activity, or digital literacy, because they need to know that it's important not to share too much information, because sometimes we haven't, our students haven't been exposed to that they shouldn't, type in all kinds of information on forms online that they're not sure about. They don't know what reliable and unreliable websites are. So teaching them the difference between those things can save them a lot of trouble in the long run.
Before we move on, there was a question a little bit further back about, can you explain credit invisibility? I think you mentioned that. So can you explain credit invisibility?
Yeah, that's a great question. So credit invisible, the way that I explain it to students is, if you have your best friend and you have me, this teacher that you just met, and you have $100, and your friend who you've loaned money to in the past 10 times paid you back 7 times. So they're at like a 70% paid me back rate. Or there's me, who they don't know me. They don't know, if I've ever borrowed money. They don't know how much money I earn. They don't know anything about me. And the best friend and me, we both ask the person, we ask the student, can we borrow $100? And the student has to pick one of us. And I always ask the students, okay, so who would you pick? Would you pick your best friend, or would you pick me, the person you just met? And every single time the students say, I'm going to pick the one that's my best friend because I've loaned money to her before and she usually pays me back. And I explain to students that that's exactly what banks do. They would rather loan money to someone that usually pays them back than someone they have no idea about. And that person that they have no idea about would be someone that's considered credit invisible.
Thank you, she says. Thank you. Thank you for the question. Great question.
Great. Okay. So now let's jump into those resources. So the one that I really recommend is the FDIC Money Smart Curriculum. And they created, some different curriculum. And this curriculum includes a teacher guide. So it tells you exactly what to say with the different slides. They have slideshow presentations. They have worksheets. They have participant guides. They have pretty much everything you would need to teach classes on financial literacy. I will tell you that these they are a bit more advanced, so I wouldn't recommend using them with, beginner or intermediate ESL students. It would be better for advanced ESL or native English speakers just because of the way it's written. And most of the time I use the adults one, the regular adults one. The young adults is made for like 16 to 21 or so. The adults one is more general, and the older adults one is more for, protecting yourself from scams and things like that. And I've put this link here, and I can email this whole presentation out to anyone that's interested.
Carol says she would love the presentation, and Felicia said, yes, that would be great. All right.
Perfect. All righty. So the second resource that we're going to look at is something from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. It's really long. They usually just go by CFPB. And this is, a segment of the federal government. And something that they provide is these free booklets. And I'll show you in just a second what those kind of look like, but you can order them for free, like as many as you want. Some of them are in Spanish, but their different options are behind on bills, debt getting in your way, want credit to work for you, and building your savings. So these are the different options that they have right now. Sometimes they create new ones and put them on their website. But this is kind of what those look like. These are the internal pages. So it's like a spiral notebook kind of thing for each of the booklets that you order. And each of the pages folds out and is interactive. And I like it because it has different, the students write in there. They figure out, okay, what are my different types of income? What are my different types of expenses? All kinds of different things. So you can order those for free. You can even just, drop them off at your local library or keep them in your office and just have them for anyone that wants them ready to grab, or you could use them in the classroom and do full lessons with it. So I know earlier we had some questions. Where should we start? The simplest one is going to be with income and expenses. So what I do with this one is I start with, tell me all of your expenses. And it's really easy for them because they are usually paying their bills. They can tell you all of their expenses. And so I pull up on the screen an Excel spreadsheet. We look at all of their expenses, and then we calculate how much an hour do I need to earn to cover my expenses. And that scares them sometimes. So then we turn the tables and we look at this. How can we decrease our expenses? We look at fixed and variable expenses. Which ones can I control? We look at paying more than the minimum on things like credit cards. We look at how to shop using coupons and sales, and how to work on improving our credit so that we get lower interest rates and better terms on our different loans. So I have another question for you. If you asked your students how they can get more money, what would they say?
Get a better job. Thank you, Evangelina. Get another job, says Marlene. Get second and third job, work more hours. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Doris. More education, says Brenda. Stella says probably get another job. Thank you all for your responses.
Yeah, that's great. So I usually get a few different replies from students, but the most common one I get is get another job. That's the most common one. And when we, talk with our students about that, it goes back to short-term decisions and long-term goals. So when we talk to our students, we can introduce that concept of, well, we have some different options for education. How can we get you there? And that really opens up that conversation. And a lot of times they're going to say, but I don't know what I want to do. And that's where I would introduce this concept of an interest profiler. So part of the, the ONET network, they have a website called My Next Move that has tons of different resources. I highly recommend using this website. But here's kind of what the interest profiler looks like. They'll fill out, 60 questions, from no, this sounds terrible to yes, this looks awesome, with different types of, work activities. Once they go through that, it's going to give them their interest profiler results. So they'll see what type of jobs they would be interested in. They can look at different job zones going from little to no preparation all the way up to extensive, and they can click on those and see what jobs match in different levels of preparation. And once they do that, they'll be able to see what jobs are going to work with things I like. So for this one, I clicked that third job zone, medium job preparation, and these are all different jobs that would match what that student's interested in. So that's something that I have students do, and they say, I have no idea what I want to do, or I think I want to do this, but I'm not sure. So getting them on here, this helps them do more research and figure out what different jobs are, because they might not know that there are a wide variety of jobs available that would fit kind of what they're interested in. Another thing you can do with students is working on career ladders. So this, a career ladder can be found on your local workforce board's website. So Workforce Solutions, and then you just look for your area of the state. I'm over in the rural capital area. So one of ours is for a medical assistant, and we are able to offer medical assistant IETs. So after that, this would be kind of the anchor job, the bottom of that career ladder. And all they need is an industry credential. So then I could work with a student and say, okay, are you going to stop here, or do we want to move up? And then they have the option to move up to the next level. And when you're looking at these, any of the ones that are blue are ones that are in really high demand in your area. So I could say, okay, are you interested in maybe being a dental assistant or something like that, or any of these other ones? And I work with them. Okay, how are we going to get to that next step? How are we going to get here? How are we going to increase your income and increase your education? And each of these career ladders, they move up. So here's our, tier 2 up to tier 3, and then stops up at tier 4. And of course, as we're moving up this, it's going to increase in education level and income. So this is a good way to start planning some different career moves with your students. So once I've worked with a student and we've created a plan on, in general, where do we want to go? Then we break it down more specifically. So in my organization, we do this as part of the ITech plan, and then we update it mid-semester with each student. I pulled this from the Integrating Career Awareness booklet. You can find that online. It's free. You can download it as a PDF. And we look at SMART goals because my students have very big dreams sometimes, but they don't know how to get there. And so we break it down and make it really easy for them. So we look at, is it specific? Is it measurable? Is it achievable? And that achievable level is where we're really having that conversation on, do you need my help with resources? That's where we can step in and get those resources to help them get where they need to be. Is it relevant to their life? I find that one especially important to talk about with my younger students, because a lot of times they're in my classes because their parents are making them do it. They don't really want to do it themselves. So working with them to create goals that are things they want in their life is really important for them, not just appeasing someone else in their life necessarily. And the last one, that time element. When we have set that time element with them, it takes away that procrastination, because then, they've set a goal themselves. They have a specific time that they want to do something by. And this, section right here is pulled directly from one of the worksheets in that book. So let's look at a couple more sections we can look at with students. So here they have this great plan. They know what they want to do. And then they say, oh, but what if this happens? And what if this happens? And this is where I work with students and I say, a lot of times we have things come up in life and it feels like the world's unfair to us, but can we predict some of the things that I think might prevent me from being successful? And so I just say, I'm not saying these bad things are going to happen. I'm just saying, what are we going to do if that does happen? What are we going to do if your babysitter is sick? Who's going to watch your kids while you're in class? And different conversations like that. And for every, thing that could potentially stop them that we can think of together, we try to think of not only a plan A, but also a plan B. If my babysitter is sick, okay, well, Who's my secondary person? Do I have a trustworthy babysitter I can pay if I'm really desperate? Do I have a different family member? Can I have that conversation with the family member now instead of at the last minute? And going through things that can hold them back. And last, we look at the different action steps. So what are they going to do and when are they going to do it by? Especially if they're looking for those, positions that are higher up on that career ladder, they have a lot of different specific steps they need to take to get to that goal. And so helping them figure out how long is that realistically going to take? How much money is that realistically going to take? Different things like that can be really helpful for them so they know exactly what they need to do. And lastly, let's take a look at how can we make sure our students are set up for success. Being able to offer job search assistance, like we talked about earlier, some people just still have no idea where to look for jobs. They don't know. They say, should I look in the newspaper? Should I look online? Should I go to the library and look? Should I go into different, places and ask if they're hiring? They don't know. They don't know what to do. So making sure that they know someone's available to help them look for jobs. And once they've found some jobs they're interested in, helping them fill out the applications and resumes. A big thing that I found with that is when they're filling out online applications, which almost all jobs require online applications, a lot of my students have struggled uploading a file. They don't know how to do an attachment and upload their resume. So making sure you show them how to do that can be really helpful. Offering to do mock interviews. Another thing is you can go into your ESL and HSE classrooms, which is, our basic service style students, and telling them about the IET classes that you have available and letting them know that that's an option. And even if it's one that they require a GED and you go in and talk to a GED class, you can say, hey, we offer these kinds of classes. So after you get your GED, reach out to me and I can help you out. And that could help the GED students have, bigger goals set to get into what they want to do. Another option is, helping them look for outside training providers. We can only offer each IET student one training. So let's say they finish CNA and they say, okay, well, I want to be a medication aide. And you say, that's great. I can't pay for you. So let's look for where we can get maybe a scholarship for this to be paid for, where the training providers are, and helping them be set up for their next step. And then, of course, for our college-bound students, telling them about different financial aid and grants. A lot of people don't have help. Maybe their parents didn't go to college. They have no idea how to fill out all kinds of forms online for college. So offering your time and your kindness and your patience for helping them fill out these things so they feel like they have someone to come to help them. That could be make or break for their future. Them being able to have someone help them with filling out the FAFSA could be make or break if they go to college or they don't. So just to wrap up, here's some key points. Our standards do align with the concepts we have in financial literacy. There's a variety of staff members that can teach these concepts to our students. We went over quite a few of the elements of financial literacy, and it's a lot broader than people think. You can start simple with teaching financial literacy to your students, and my recommendation there is budgeting. You can help students explore careers through interest profilers. You can use SMART goals to help set career goals, and some different things that students need to make sure they are successful. Alrighty, so we are finished now. So I'd be happy to take any questions in the chat.
Any final questions? I know that Anne Marie, you had a recommendation. If you want to share that.
Okay, really quickly, everybody, I'm going to put in the chat pod. There is financial literacy resources from Teaching Skills That Matter. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to download. Those of you that have taken the Standards 3.0 trainings may have heard about this already, but it's wonderful. So I'm going to put 2 links in the chat pod here, and you can download lesson plans and other resources to use with financial literacy. So hold on. Thank you so much, Olga.
So we had a question that said, what tools do you suggest for students to use for budgeting pen and paper or apps? Do you have any recommendations?
So I think that would depend on, their level of digital comfort. So I mean, I personally find it easiest to do budgeting in Excel. But there are a variety of phone apps that are free for budgeting. I don't have any specific recommendations, but they're very easy to find on the app store of their phone. If they're a student who's more comfortable with pen and paper, that's definitely another option for them. It really depends on the student and what works the best for them.
So Catherine says, is it possible to receive Andrea's email to receive her PowerPoint? So thank you so much, Andrea, and thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Andrea. Great information. We appreciate you presenting for Workforce Wednesday. So thank you, everybody, for attending.
Yeah, thanks so much, everyone. And thanks for having me, Olga.